Dr. Bhrett, welcome into the Morning Blitz. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
All right. Hey, Doc, before we get into some of the things from this weekend, you've been a regular part of the show, but I like to remind people kind of what you do, how you do it, and why it's so important. I love when you go to your website, the way it starts off is what you want to become starts with a dream, a vision, a desire. Those who make it happen are the ones who understand that it all begins with the mind. Can I tell our listeners exactly what the Mindside is and how you, Dr. Bhrett, do what you do to help athletes and people be better at what they want to be?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I started, I'm a clinical psychologist. So my doctorate's in clinical psychology. I'm licensed in the state as a clinical, but I don't do any work with clinical anymore. I do 100% of my work with athletes on human performance. And it came because of, when I was playing back in college at LSU, I really struggled. With my mindset in competition. I was overwhelmed by responsibility. I was overwhelmed with the desire to succeed. And the problem was I was really good at failing, but I was really bad at succeeding. And what I meant by that is the responsibility upon my success to do it again was just absolutely paralyzing for me, because I would sit there in the dugout and I'd worry not about the experience I was having in the moment, but what this experience would mean in future games. And so there was a moment that happened for me, and I'll never forget it. It was March of 1994. Nolan Ryan was my hero growing up. He was in the opposing team dugout. We were playing his son's team, Texas Christian. And I really struggled in a game, and I got challenged by my coach walking off the field. I'd had a really big success, and he challenged me, and I didn't meet the challenge. And he pretty much said, look, if you walk this next batter, I'm taking you out of the ball game. And I did, and he did. And the next day, he did the exact same thing to me. I got out of massive jams in a game, and what happened was I went back and started understanding why I failed. And why I failed was I was playing in a world of what I call if-then statements. If I don't fail, then I can succeed. Mm-hmm. And that moment, Martin, that day, my life changed. And my life changed because I started to fully embrace the challenge and understand that I was okay regardless. Whether I failed or succeeded, I was okay. So if that's the case, then I was going to start building towards succeeding and grabbing what was mine. And I embraced really an aggressive mindset. It doesn't mean that I was being over-aggressive. It just meant if there was a challenge or a target out there, I was shooting to hit the target. I wasn't shooting to hit the tree next to it and kill the deer. I was going to shoot to kill the deer. And that day, my life changed. And if it wasn't for that day, I wouldn't be where I'm at. So my whole practice is built around helping people understand what I call what their manifesto is. What is their intent and purpose of the way they see the world? And can they invest and understand who they are? So for an athlete, a professional athlete, I have players that make millions upon millions of dollars. They have the same challenges as the 14, 15-year-old junior athlete that's out there. And so it's understanding who you are. If you're a restaurant, you know what your cuisine is. But as people, we don't often know what our own mental approach is. It's different for everybody. I don't have a system. I meet a person, and I help them understand the way they think to engage the moment. And they do that based on their trusted strategies that they've developed in their life. If somebody is very calm and serene, I have a professional athlete who, on a scale of 1 to 10 of intensity level, 10 being, a middle linebacker in the SEC or NFL, 1 being a guy surfing on a beach, he's like a 3. And when he gets in the heat of the moment, he loves it, but he doesn't spike. He's just like, dude, he wins or loses. Right. He's chill. Yeah. But his challenge is preparation. So I have to understand what everybody does. And so that's what the Mindside is about.
That is awesome. And speaking of that, let's bring that home to a young man that has shown unbelievable composure. And ironically, it seems to be this is the year of the freshman handling the pressure. But can you take and kind of look at the way Jalen Hurts and Michelle from Texas and Jacob Eason from Georgia, when you look at these young men, I hear their teammates making statements about they're composed, they're mature, they're all of these things. And we saw the lick that Jalen took. It almost looked like that lick helped him. Is that possible that lick helped Jalen Hurts in that game, and how would that work?
It's so funny you asked that question. I'm going to give you two answers here, and they're going to be connected. This past week, I spent a week with a colleague of mine who's a former Navy SEAL, and he's a professional golfer now. It's an interesting story, and I'll give you his name. One of these days you should have him on the air.
Okay.
But he was talking about how when he was walking down the streets of Iraq or in the mountains of Afghanistan, there's always a tension until somebody fired on you. Once somebody fired on you, he used to say his mind would go, here we go. And he would get excited.
Right.
Because that's what he was prepared for, right?
Right.
The what if is such a powerful thing that we're trying to see what's going to happen. And then once it happens, it's like, okay, now the training kicks in. And those guys are so incredibly trained. Well, training is also contributing to what you're seeing from these young athletes. It doesn't matter what position. I remember when I was in college, we had a true freshman that came in, and he ended up being my roommate. We had just come off of our national title, and I said, hey, what's your goals for this year? And he said, I want to be an All-American at second base. I said, freshmen don't play at LSU. He said, I do. And he did, and he was an All-American. He's in the College Baseball Hall of Fame now. These types of players come in, and whether from a quarterbacking position, if it's organizations like QB Country, Elite 11, those types of quarterback training environments, they don't just train the physical. They're building and working with these athletes to train them mentally. And so a lot of these high schools are understanding the role of these quarterbacks, and they're putting them in more and more positions to become leaders. So when they get into a college level, these young men go, wait a minute, it's not about what skills I have, because I think we all pretty much have some similar skills. It's how I connect to the people around me and how I prepare and how I get better. This Navy SEAL told me a great quote, and I think this is one of the best quotes I've ever heard. Is he said, we don't rise up to the challenge or the expectations in competition. We fall to the level of our training. Now you think about that. How powerful is that?
That is good.
Everybody
really good.
thinks that when the whistle blows, you're going to rise up to this magical moment and be a gamer. The truth is, you fall to the level of your training.
Wow.
And SEALs, what makes them so brilliant is their training is so intense, but their training is so much better than everybody else's, so that's why they're so good. And he said, he's made a comment to me that I thought was so cool. He said, look, every once in a while, you make a hole-in-one on a par 5. And he said, think about that. You get lucky. Something crazy is going to happen. He said, that's what it takes for us to get caught in a bad situation. Because we have a game plan. We have an A plan, a B plan, a C plan, a D plan, and an oh-no plan, and then a no-go plan.
Right.
And he said, so we trust that. And every once in a while, he said, somebody gets lucky and does something to us, and that's where you hear about the casualties. But he said, we have more casualties in training than we do in combat because our training is so intense.
Speaking with Dr. Bhrett McCabe of the Mindside, if you missed this and you missed the beginning, please make sure you go back out and visit Tide1029.com to get a replay. But Bhrett, Dr. McCabe, as we move that conversation, kind of moving it along, there was an article written by Gridiron Now, by Justin Nail, and he says Kelly has given the blueprint for beating Alabama. Now, based on what that conversation we've just had, I say, what good is a blueprint if you don't have the tools to execute it? Also, is Alabama's blueprint stationary like a building, or is it a moving blueprint?
Now, that'd be a gross misunderstanding of the human performance, right?
Right.
So, Kelly is a tremendous quarterback. He'll play in the NFL, and there's no doubt about it. We've seen it for a couple of years now, how good this quarterback is. Every game is different. Every scenario is different. I tell athletes there's 5 ways to evaluate an outcome if it doesn't go well. It was bad preparation. You just simply didn't train well enough. But sometimes we train well enough and we don't win. Okay, so sometimes it's a bad strategy. So you get into the game and you think you're going to overpower the left side of their defensive line, and come to find out their left side of their defensive line just beats you that day. Okay, it was a bad strategy. Maybe they rose up to the challenge. Maybe you did something you shouldn't have done, but the game plan was what you believed in, but you were prepared. Sometimes it's bad execution. How often do we see that in sports where, a wide receiver breaks behind the defensive backs and the quarterback overthrows them, or the wide receiver just makes a bad cut and misses by 2 yards, and it looks like a bad throw, but the truth was the wide receiver cut off the route. It was bad execution. Sometimes it's bad bad mental focus. You had a letdown in the game.
Mm-hmm.
I know Coach Saban has said that in the media where, game comes down to 5 or 6 plays. So are you mentally engaged enough every play to be able to address the challenge that's before you? And then the last one is just bad luck. Look, I mean, sometimes it happens. A ball bounces on the ground and it pops straight up to the defensive lineman. Sometimes it's, bad weather rolls in that's beyond your control. So if you look at it like that and somebody goes, well, that's making an assumption. If you beat a team, if you take a Bill Belichick Patriots team,
right,
and you beat them in week 1 and you play them again in week 8 and you think you have the same game plan that's going to work, it's not. And if you have any question about that, as a former LSU Tiger, look back at the national championship game a couple years ago. I mean, that was comical, the difference between a team that is constantly growing and adjusting and a team that's trying to redo their vacation from the previous season. That's what it is. It's like, oh, I love the beach. We're going to go to the exact same place we went last year and do the exact same thing. You're not going to have the same enjoyment. There's no way.
All right. This is Dr. Bhrett McCabe of the Mindside. And I got one more question for you. And I don't know if you've ever heard me say it or not, but I believe that walking the sideline at Alabama is one of the greatest leaders, period. Not just from a standpoint of football, but just leadership and understanding organization vision, but also coaching his coaches. How do you help our audience understand, how does a leader learn to engage? And when you look at the difference in how Saban handles one coordinator versus another, other coach versus this, how difficult is that, and how do you develop that process?
Well, remember this simple fact. Leaders lead people. They don't lead systems. People build systems. So if you start at the person level and you understand the people, sometimes people need to be reminded of what's important and clear up the clutter, and sometimes you need to let them spread their wings and fly. Great leaders understand that, and they know how to move within an organization to give what one person needs on one thing and what another person needs on another, and still be consistent to your belief and your philosophy. Leaders lead. Leaders lead. It's a simple fact. And so I tell leaders all the time, and coaches, don't try to be the coach that inspired you. Don't try to be the leader that inspired you. Don't try to be the captain that inspired you. Be you and lead. And if you do that, you trust your instincts and you trust the training that you have within you. I played for a coach much like Coach Saban. He could have run a Fortune 500 company.
Right.
His systems and processes were in place, and he did. He became the AD at LSU. That's a multi-million-dollar organization, and ran it very successfully. So when you see great leaders, I think Pete Carroll's the same way. I think Urban Meyer's the same way. They can lead anything. They just choose to do it on the football field. Well, we also know from, if you look at the history of sports, the football coach at Coastal Carolina also ran a multi-million-dollar investment company before he went back into coaching. So great leaders share attributes, but the most important attribute they share is they lead. They simply lead.
Speaking with Dr. Bhrett McCabe, I told you one more question, but I got to get this in for our high school athletes. Coach Saban talked about in the press conference why Eddie Jackson was in the position that he was in returning punts. It was based on prior performance in terms of interceptions and things he had done at practice. Speak to our high school athletes that, hey, it's about halfway through the season, some of them not playing the position they thought they should or where they think they deserve. What can they do, or what should they continue to do to create an opportunity much like what happened for Eddie Jackson this past weekend with the punt return?
Never take a break off in practice. Raise your intensity level. Remember, you fall to your level of training. So if you're upset and angry about not playing, look at how that changes your preparation. And if it dips, it's going to dip in competition. So then you wonder, well, why am I not playing? I need more reps. No, you don't. You need to be better in practice. D'Angelo Williams this past week put up something about, I don't care where I play or if I carry the water or I clean the bathrooms. I'll do whatever it takes to help our team win the Super Bowl. If every athlete, and look, if everybody in society adopted that mindset, it's not about what you're getting, it's about what you're investing. That's a simple thing to remember. It's not about what you're getting, it's what you're investing. I never know when it's going to come to harvest, but I can continue to invest in the process.
All right. There's those scripture that says you reap what you sow. And so there
Absolutely.
you have it. So to greatness, even at practice, and you'll see greatness when the opportunity comes. That's Dr. Bhrett McCabe of the Mindside. You can visit them at themindside.com, where what you want to become starts with a dream, a vision, a desire. Those who make it happen are the ones who understand that it all begins with the mind. That's Dr. Bhrett McCabe, and he'll be joining us next week as we continue to move throughout the season. Thanks, Doc.
Thank you.